Let me say something that most people will spend their entire lives refusing to accept. Nobody is coming to save you. Not your parents, not your government, not your boss, your partner, your mentor, your pastor, or your favorite motivational speaker on YouTube. Not luck, not timing, not a miracle, not some perfect moment when everything aligns and your life finally makes sense. Nobody is coming. And I know that sounds brutal. I know some of you are watching this in a season where everything feels like it's falling apart, and hearing that nobody's coming feels like being kicked when you're already down. But here's the thing. That statement isn't meant to crush you. It's meant to free you. Because the moment you stop waiting to be rescued, the moment you stop looking over your shoulder for someone to swoop in and fix your life, is the exact moment your real life begins. And the bridge between where you are and where you want to be has exactly one material holding it together: discipline. We live in a world that has done something very dangerous to us. It has trained us to wait. Wait for the right opportunity. Wait for things to calm down. Wait until you feel motivated. Wait until you have more money, more time, more certainty, more confidence. Wait for someone to see your potential. Wait for your circumstances to change. This is what I call the rescue fantasy, and it is one of the most destructive forces operating in the average person's life today. The rescue fantasy shows up in dozens of forms. It's the person who stays in a dead-end job for 6 years, quietly hoping their boss will one day recognize them and hand them a promotion they've never asked for. It's the person who buys lottery tickets every week, not as entertainment, but as a genuine financial strategy. It's the person who keeps waiting to feel ready before starting the business, writing the book, having the hard conversation, hitting the gym. It's you scrolling social media at midnight, watching other people live their lives, telling yourself your time is coming, while doing nothing to make it come faster. The rescue fantasy is seductive because it requires nothing from you. It asks you to stay passive, stay comfortable, stay hopeful in a soft and costless way. It lets you feel like you're still in the game while you're sitting on the bench. But here's what nobody tells you. Hope without action is just delay with a better story. The people you admire, the ones who seem to have made it, they didn't get there because the universe eventually got around to rewarding them. They got there because at some point, in some quiet and unglamorous moment, they decided to stop waiting and start working. Day after day, whether they felt like it or not. That decision has a name. It's called discipline. Let's talk about what discipline actually is, because I think most people have it completely wrong. Discipline is not punishment. It is not white-knuckling your way through life. It is not some military-grade act of willpower that only special people are born with. It's not waking up at 4 a.m. if 4 a.m. doesn't fit your life. And it is absolutely not about being hard on yourself. Discipline, at its core, is simply the ability to do what needs to be done when it needs to be done, whether you feel like it or not. That's it. That's the whole thing. It is the gap between intention and action, and discipline is what bridges that gap. Every single day, think about someone who wants to get in shape. The intention is there. They want to be healthier, feel better, look better. But the gap between wanting to go to the gym and actually going to the gym, that gap is not filled by motivation. Motivation is a feeling, and feelings are temporary. You don't feel motivated every day. Nobody does. Discipline is what moves your body out of bed, even when motivation has gone quiet. Discipline is showing up to the gym on the days when you're tired, when it's raining, when you've had a rough week and the couch is calling your name. Discipline is doing the rep nobody sees, writing the paragraph nobody reads yet, making the call nobody knows about. And here's what's fascinating. The more you practice discipline, the less you need motivation. Because you stop relying on how you feel to determine what you do. Your feelings become largely irrelevant to your behavior. You act not from emotion, but from commitment. That shift, from being feeling-driven to commitment-driven, is one of the most powerful transformations a human being can make. Now here's where people get confused. They think discipline is about restriction. They think it's about saying no to everything enjoyable and living like a monk. But real discipline isn't about restriction. It's about direction. A disciplined person isn't someone who never rests. They're someone who rests intentionally at the right time and then gets back to work. A disciplined person isn't someone who never has fun. They're someone who has earned their freedom through consistent action. So when they can relax fully without the weight of guilt, regret, or paralysis. Discipline creates the freedom that undisciplined people are desperately chasing. That's the great irony. We need to have an honest conversation about motivation because the way it's sold to us is one of the biggest scams in the self-improvement industry. Open YouTube, open Instagram, open TikTok. You will find an ocean of motivational content. Fire speeches, epic music, slow-motion footage of athletes grinding in gyms. People yelling at you about your potential. You have to want it like you want to breathe. Rise and grind. Pain is temporary. And look, I understand the appeal. That stuff is genuinely exciting in the moment. It gets your blood pumping. It makes you feel like you're about to change your life. But then what happens? You watch the video. You feel fired up. You maybe take 1 or 2 actions. And then a few days later, the feeling fades. Life gets in the way. The friction returns. The excitement dies down. And you're back where you started, wondering why you can't stay consistent. This is not a character flaw. This is how motivation works. Motivation is emotional. It spikes high and crashes hard. It is completely unreliable as a long-term fuel source. Research in behavioral psychology has shown for decades that motivation follows action, not the other way around. Meaning, you don't get motivated and then start. You start, and motivation sometimes shows up as a result. But because we've been trained to wait until we feel inspired to act, we've accidentally built lives that depend on a resource that keeps running out. Think about the most successful people in any field: elite athletes, great artists, highly effective entrepreneurs. Ask them if they feel motivated every single day. Most of them will laugh. A professional marathon runner doesn't wait until they feel like running 20 miles. A concert pianist doesn't sit at the piano only when inspiration strikes. A surgeon doesn't step into the operating room based on their mood that morning. They show up because showing up is what they do. It is baked into who they are. That's discipline. The real question isn't, how do I stay motivated? The real question is, how do I build a life where I don't need to be motivated to do the important things? The answer is identity. When you see yourself as someone who works out, not someone trying to work out, but someone who genuinely is a person who trains, the behavior becomes natural. When writing is simply part of who you are, you sit down and write not because you're inspired, but because it's Tuesday. Discipline is how you build an identity. An identity is how you build a life. I want to talk about something that doesn't get discussed enough in conversations about self-improvement: the actual cost of waiting. Not the philosophical cost. The real, measurable, life-altering cost of choosing comfort over discipline for one more day, one more month, one more year. Let's look at something practical. Suppose you want to build a skill. Let's say you want to learn to code, or become a better writer, or build a business. If you spend 1 year practicing that skill for 1 disciplined hour a day, you'll have invested 365 hours in a mastery. People have built careers on less. People have written novels, launched products, and transformed their expertise with that kind of consistency. But if you wait, if you spend that year telling yourself you'll start soon, you'll start when things settle down, you'll start when you feel ready, you end up with the same unbuilt skill, the same unlived life, and 1 year less to work with. Time is the one resource nobody can give back to you. And here's what makes it painful. The cost of inaction is largely invisible. When you don't go to the gym today, you don't feel it today. When you don't work on your business today, you don't feel it today. When you don't have the hard conversation today, nothing immediately explodes. The consequences of undisciplined living are slow, compounding, and quiet until suddenly they're not. Until you're 40 years old, waking up in a life that doesn't feel like yours, wondering where the time went. Until you're watching someone else do the thing you talked about doing for 5 years. Until your health forces you to pay attention to a body you ignored. The philosopher Seneca said it more than 2,000 years ago: Dum defector vita transcurrit. While we delay, life passes by. He was writing to people who kept saying, "I'll live my real life soon." He was warning them that soon never comes on its own. You have to call it in with action. Now here's the thing about discipline that changes everything when you internalize it. The cost of discipline is almost always less than the cost of regret. Waking up an hour earlier hurts a little. Saying no to the distraction hurts a little. Doing the hard thing when you don't want to hurt a little. But that pain is immediate, it's finite, and it produces something. It produces growth. It produces momentum. It produces the slow, cumulative miracle of a life built on purpose. Regret, on the other hand, is a different kind of pain entirely. It's chronic. It doesn't produce anything. And it haunts you at 2 a.m. in ways that no amount of discipline ever will. Choose your heart. The heart of discipline or the heart of regret. You don't get to opt out of hard. Nobody does. All right, we've established that nobody's coming to save you, that motivation is unreliable, and that waiting has a serious cost. Now let's talk about how you actually build discipline in real life. Not as a theory, but as a practice. The biggest enemy of consistent action is the gap between intention and beginning. Most people fail not because they lack discipline, but because they make starting too hard. They decide they're going to overhaul their entire life at once. New diet, new workout, new sleep schedule, new morning routine, new business plan, and they attempt it all on Monday. By Wednesday, they've collapsed. Real discipline is built through small, repeatable commitments that you honor consistently. Not the biggest possible version of the behavior, the smallest version you can do without fail. You don't start by running 5 miles. You start by putting on your running shoes every day. You don't start by writing 2,000 words a day. You start by sitting at your desk and writing 1 sentence. You don't overhaul your diet overnight. You add 1 disciplined choice, 1 healthier meal, 1 skip distraction, and you build from there. James Clear calls these making habits obvious, attractive, easy, and satisfying. The key word is easy. You lower the friction of the right action until the default behavior is to just do it. Willpower is a finite resource. Studies consistently show that as the day goes on, your capacity for self-control depletes. This is why most people do their worst eating, their worst decision-making, and their most regrettable scrolling late at night. The tank is empty. Disciplined people understand this. They don't rely on willpower. They build systems. A system is a set of pre-made decisions that remove the need to decide in the moment. If your workout clothes are laid out the night before, you don't have to decide whether to work out in the morning. You just put them on. If your phone is in another room during work hours, you don't have to exercise willpower every 3 minutes to not pick it up. The decision is already made. Design your environment so that the disciplined choice is the path of least resistance. Remove the friction from what you want to do. Add friction to what you want to stop doing. Your environment is more powerful than your willpower. Redesign your environment. Here's something that doesn't get talked about enough. Every time you break a promise to yourself, you erode your own self-trust. Every time you say, "I'll do it tomorrow," and tomorrow comes and you don't, a tiny piece of your belief in your own word chips away. Over time, you stop believing yourself. You make promises, "I'll start Monday. This is the last time. I'm serious about this." And some part of your brain has learned not to take you seriously because you betrayed yourself before. Rebuilding self-trust is one of the most important and underrated parts of building discipline. And you rebuild it the same way you'd rebuild trust with anyone else, by doing what you said you would do, even in small things. Make small commitments. Honor them. Make slightly larger commitments. Honor those too. Your confidence isn't built by thinking more highly of yourself. It's built by collecting evidence that you follow through. Every time you do what you said you would do, you become someone who keeps their word. And someone who keeps their word to themselves is someone who is building a life, not just dreaming of one. One of the greatest sources of discipline destruction is outcome obsession. People start a new habit and spend the first 2 weeks looking for dramatic results. When the results don't show up fast enough, they quit. But discipline isn't about quick results. It's about the process. It's about who you become through the daily act of showing up. The gym you go to today won't give you a six-pack by tomorrow. But the person who goes to the gym consistently for 6 months is fundamentally different from the person who didn't. Not just physically, psychologically. They have evidence of their own capability. They know how to push through discomfort. They have built a habit of honoring commitments. That changes everything. Trust the process. The results will follow, but only for those who show up long enough to receive them. I want to shift the frame here because I think we talk about discipline primarily in terms of results, the body you want, the business you want, the skill you want to build. And those outcomes matter. But I think the deeper argument for discipline is this. Discipline is how you become the person you were meant to be. Let me explain what I mean. Every choice you make is a vote for a version of yourself. When you wake up and choose to go for the run instead of staying in bed, you're voting for the identity of someone who is fit, committed, and mentally strong. When you sit down and do the work instead of scrolling, you're voting for the identity of someone who is serious, focused, and capable. When you have the hard conversation instead of avoiding it, you're voting for the identity of someone who faces reality with courage. These votes add up. Over weeks, months, years, the accumulated choices you make in the small, private moments of your life literally construct the person you become. And this is why discipline is not about punishing yourself. It's about loving your future self enough to act on their behalf today. It's about looking at the person you want to become in 5 years and working backward to the actions that create that person. The undisciplined version of you, the one who keeps choosing comfort over commitment, that version of you isn't happy. They're comfortable, yes, but not happy, because somewhere deep down, they know what they're capable of. They know what they're avoiding. And the distance between who they are and who they could be creates a low-grade, chronic dissatisfaction that no amount of entertainment or distraction can fully silence. That quiet voice that says, you could be doing more, that's not there to torture you. That's your deeper self pulling toward your potential. Discipline is how you answer that call. Here's the last thing I want to say, and I think it's the most important. The deepest discipline happens in the moments when nobody is watching. Not when you're posting about your morning run. Not when you're telling people about your big plans. Not when you're being held accountable by a friend or a coach. But in the quiet, invisible moments, when it's just you and the choice and nobody to see what you decide. That's where character is built. That's where real discipline lives. It's the meal you choose when no one's tracking your calories. The work you put in at midnight when nobody's monitoring your output. The money you save when nobody's auditing your spending. The integrity you maintain when nobody would know the difference. Those moments, the private, unglamorous, fully anonymous moments, are the ones that define you. Because here's what those moments are really saying. You're doing this for yourself. Not for approval. Not for validation. Not to impress anyone. You're doing it because you've decided that you deserve a better life, and you're willing to do the work when no one is watching. That is the highest form of discipline, and it's the form that actually changes lives. Most people live for an audience. They're motivated by how they look to others, what their friends think, what their followers see, what their family believes about them. And that kind of external accountability can help, but it's fragile. The moment the audience disappears, so does the behavior. The person who doesn't need an audience, who does the work in the dark, who keeps the commitment in private, who builds in silence, that person cannot be stopped because their fuel source is internal. And internal fuel doesn't run out when people aren't watching. Nobody will save you, and nobody needs to see you save yourself. You just need to do it. Let me bring this full circle. You woke up today in the same life you had yesterday. Maybe it's a life you're proud of. Maybe it's one you've been trying to escape for years. Either way, the people around you are living their own lives. They're not waiting around with a rescue plan for you. The world is not conspiring to make your life easier. Time is not pausing until you're ready. The only person who can change your life is looking back at you in the mirror every morning. Not the version of you that waits. Not the version that scrolls and consumes and keeps meaning to start. The version of you that decides right now, today in this ordinary moment, that the waiting is over. Discipline is not the absence of struggle. It's the decision to keep going through it. Discipline is not the absence of fear. It's the act of moving forward in spite of it. Discipline is not a punishment for your current life. It's the price of admission to the one you actually want. Nobody is coming to save you. That's not a tragedy. That's the best news you've ever received. because it means you were never waiting on someone else. It means you had the power all along. All you have to do is use it. One day, one choice, 1 hour, one decision at a time. Start today. Start now. Start before you feel ready, because the feeling of readiness is a lie, and the only thing that matters is that you begin. The life you want is on the other side of the discipline you've been avoiding. Go get it. If this hit you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe if you want more content like this. No fluff, just truth. And drop in the comments, what's the one area of your life where you know discipline would change everything? I'll see you in the next one.